Oh, well hello there. Welcome to my friendly local board game store. Can I interest you in perusing our affordable indie RPGs? No? You're interested in the latest D&D publication. Well, I don't blame you. It is, after all, the world's greatest role-playing game. Oh, you were actually looking for some advice on D&D? Well, I might be able to help. Players giving you problems? I've been there. My name is Jackson, and for well over the last decade, for business and pleasure, I've been running this game and gotten to play with over hundreds of players. And they weren't all perfect. In fact, you could go as far as to say that none of them were perfect. We're all a little messy. We all have our problems. But when you sit down to run a D&D game or a nice little indie RPG, the pressure falls on you as the game master to manage those problem players for the betterment of the game as a whole. Problem players. That is what I'm here today to talk to you about. Now, I know good and well that plenty of third-party content creators and plenty of YouTubers have already talked about this topic. But I guarantee you that the spin I'm about to give on it is going to be different than anything you've heard before. Now, as far as examples go, I could draw upon my drunk college bros, my Adventure League excursions, some internet randos, or even some of my professional clients. But I want to go a little more extreme. Imagine, if you will, a scenario where you have to run a game for the worst human beings imaginable. It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia is my favorite TV show. I have rewatched the show countless times and eagerly await its 17th season. Now, you don't have to go watch Always Sunny to follow this video. Its first season is pretty rough, some of the topical humor of the early episodes hasn't aged the best, and the show builds upon itself with lore and layered gags, which makes it hard to find a solid foundation to become a new fan. Above all, the comedy is derived from finding these 5 people totally unlikable. The worst people imaginable might be a stretch. They're not serial killers or war criminals. Think more like the worst asshole you've ever had to deal with in a service job and multiply them by 5 and you'll see what we're dealing with. However, if you like doing homework and you'd prefer some context, I encourage you to check out just one episode. Season 8, Episode 5, The Gang Gets Analyzed. In order to talk about problem players in D&D, we're going to be doing a little analyzing of our own. We'll take a look at how each member of the gang would act in a D&D game, and how we will deal with these behaviors as a dungeon master. Excellent. Let's get down to business. Welcome to Patty's Pub, where I will be running this little adventure and showing you how to deal with problem players using an expert method, a system I call the Jackson system. I will be showing you how to justify the game, accept the players, examine behaviors, and finally, nullify problems. If it seems like a lot, don't worry, I'll ease you into it. By the way, you look great today, and I recognize the effort that you're taking in making a better game for you and your players. I salute you. Get comfortable, maybe think about grabbing yourself a beverage before we go deeper. And I will be going deep. We first need to begin by justifying the game we want to play. This may seem like an odd first step, but it is essential. Why do we play D&D? Or all those lovely indie RPGs? All are welcome. For many, it's simple. You want fun. You want a distraction from your stressful, day-to-day life where you get to play a fantasy character with friends and dreams and money. For others, you may be looking for a connection to the people around you. You may be seeking out public playtables like Adventure League or looking for game groups online. Or You may already have some game buddies that you want to establish a deeper relationship with through collaborative storytelling. And on that note, maybe you're looking for an engaging story you can call your own. All of us have experienced some popular media that was made to appeal to everyone but wound up being loved by no one. When you sit down for a role-playing campaign, you create something that is unique to your group. And I think that's beautiful. Now, our gang won't be looking for any of that. They're all shallow people who will be looking strictly surface level. Charlie might have seen some kids playing it on TV and wanted to try it out. Mac might have noticed the physiques of men like Joe Manganiello or Vin Diesel and determined that D&D must be an essential part of their workout regimen. D could have been exposed to the theatrical benefits of role-playing through Artemis or an acting class, and Dennis may have seen the opportunity to write his own erotic fantasy tale and subject his friends to it. We could get our nut, so to speak, with any of these scenarios, but my favorite possibility comes from Frank. D&D is being used in upper-level American business as a team-building exercise, which means that Frank could easily find a loophole to write off this adventure as a business expense. That's where I come in. In our hypothetical episode of Always Sunny, I will be taking on the role of the beleaguered civilian who crosses paths with the gang and tries to make the best of a weird situation. Now, I have no doubt that in such a scenario, I would not emerge unscathed. My mind could be traumatized by the events, my body could suffer irrevocable damage and decay, and my very spirit could be subsumed by the corrupting influence of the gang. But I'm not here for me. I am willing to risk my own good time in order to create a memorable experience for my players. Plus, if all goes wrong, I'm still getting paid. That may make me a whore by definition, but capitalism makes whores of us all. At least I'm a classy whore, which happens to be the exact kind that Frank prefers. The second step in the Jackson system is to accept our players. This may be a tough pill to swallow, so go ahead and take another sip of that drink. Maybe pour yourself another if you so desire. Like many of you, I have been exposed to terrible D&D adventures through the subreddit RPG Horror Stories. They're fun to read and you might just learn something about your own games, but there's one big problem I have with the conversation. Most of the posts are cries for help or simple venting, but if you read the comments, there's an awful lot of people who have a hard-on for jumping straight to the conclusion that somebody needs to be booted from the game or that the original poster should ghost everybody immediately. Here's the thing. I've been there. I have abandoned groups, cut ties with players, and sworn to never play with certain DMs ever again. And what I have to show for it is a whole lot of burnt bridges. There can be relief and even healing found in cutting off toxic people in your life, but what happens when those people are your friends or family members who just express themselves poorly through a complicated and confusing game? I don't think that cutting ties with somebody over one session is the right answer. We can accept someone's flaws and try to budge them towards better practices if we care about playing more with them. But I won't harp on this too long. If you want to know more about the value of forgiveness, you should check out a popular influencer, a man named Jesus Christ. The bottom line is, in this scenario at least, I will have to accept these players. Frank is paying me, and I need to pay rent, so I'll have to stomach whatever the gang throws at me for just one night. It's not my first rodeo. I've had more than a few strange nights on the job that have left me sore and unsatisfied. My hope is that by nullifying certain problem behaviors, we can not only make for a better time for our players, but also make a better time for ourselves. We can't do that if we show up with the intention of judging our fellow roleplayers. I'm not your dad. I'm not your priest. I'm just your dungeon master. Let's try to have some fun. Now, let's give a long, hard look at our problem players. Our first subject is Charlie. Charlie is enthusiastic, creative, and has a flair for the dramatic. I actually think that among everybody here, Charlie would be the most fun to play with. There's still one big problem, though. D&D isn't all about silly voices and rolling dice. There's a lot of numbers, and a lot of weird words. And Charlie is illiterate. It just so happens that I've had a lot of experience with this kind of problem player, in particular through my experience as a professional dungeon master through numerous summer camps and after-school academies. Not every kid knew how to read prestidigitation and write their personality traits. And it wasn't my job to teach them literacy. It was my job to show them a good time in D&D while their parents enjoyed some peace. Charlie is the child. Mac is a complicated character, but for our purposes today, he's actually pretty easy to understand. Mac wants to be seen as a badass. He wants to establish dominance as the bodyguard of the group, and he will do everything he can to prove himself not only capable, but superior in his ability to pat down and eliminate threats. He is our power gamer. Now, let's not get a power gamer confused with an optimizer. Optimizers are fine people who know the rules and seek to elevate their play by maximizing their character's potential within strict boundaries. Power gamers don't care about boundaries and might not even have robust knowledge of the rules. And I'm betting Mac would take one look at the rulebook, determine that more dice equals more damage, and jump straight to proving that he can deal the most. Dee is also kind of basic. She's a theater kid, the kind of player who saw one episode of Critical Role and decided that's how every game needs to be played, and she can totally be just as good as Laura Bailey. Dee is going to spend a lot of time on a character voice and a long backstory that risks pulling attention away from our group storytelling in an effort to make it all about herself. Dee is a bird. But for our purposes tonight, she is a different animal, the spotlight hog. Frank gets tricky. Here is a man with nothing to gain from our game other than a tax write-off. Frank is going to be easily bored and hard to impress, no matter what storytelling flair we bring to the table. In an effort to gain some satisfaction with the game, he will most likely try asserting his destructive tendencies on the game world and the game itself. As his character sets fire to villages and kills innocent NPCs, he will probably hide behind the excuse of, "That's just what my character would do. I'm chaotic neutral." He is our game breaker. And last but not least, we have Dennis, the golden god himself. Where to begin with Dennis? Possibly psychotic, possibly an actual murderer, and certainly narcissistic. Dennis is the biggest nightmare of a player to deal with. While every other member of the gang could eventually have a good time if they got past their own eccentricities, Dennis will be laser focused on getting off on his own terms. Above all, he is not going to accept our role as the master of this game world. Dennis is a control freak. We arrive at the whole reason you clicked. Nullifying problems. I know it's taken a little while to get here, but you may have noticed that I included some chapters so that if you so desired, you could skip the foreplay and head straight to the extended climax. You're welcome. We've identified the primary behaviors we need to address. You may have noted that I highlighted the behaviors, not the people. Again, we are not here to judge people. We are just here to quickly address the behaviors we need to counter in order to create a good game for everyone involved. Let us begin. Charlie is an illiterate child. If we put too much pressure on him to read all of his abilities and do all the math himself, he will quickly become frustrated and discouraged and descend into emotional outbursts. We need to prevent that from happening, and here's how we're going to do it. We're going to try saying, "Charlie, what do you want to do?" This is the kind of basic DMing New Age dungeon masters have grown away from, but sometimes we need to go back to basics. Instead of asking Charlie to tell us his movement, action, item interaction, and bonus action on his turn, we'll just encourage Charlie to say what he wants to do, and make it our job to interpret that into the game's language. After some repetition, he'll get the hang of it and start telling us the moves himself. Be careful not to overcorrect. In one past campaign where multiple players consistently had problems with the math side of the game, I just started rolling for them and telling them the result. This made for a quicker game, but was met with hostility. Rolling dice is fun, and Charlie will want the thrill of getting a nat 20. Let him roll his own attacks and checks, and if he's stumped on the numbers, we can help him with the addition. You can also assign another player to his helper role, like pairing up Charlie with Frank so that they have a better time playing together. A child can become distracted when it's not their turn. To prevent this, we're going to give Charlie a special job at the table. Charlie is going to be our map maker. As the gang goes through our dungeon or our overland wilderness, Charlie is going to draw it out. Provide some pencils and crayons or colorful markers. I would avoid grid paper that values precision and instead offer loose-leaf construction paper. We'll encourage Charlie to draw the world we describe, but if he gets a neat idea, we can incorporate his contributions into the story. Remember, this is a collaborative storytelling experience that our clients are paying for, not an invitation to be inserted into your first draft fantasy novel. When Charlie sees that he gets a say in things, I think he will be thrilled, and we will see the Dayman emerge from his fractured psyche. Mac is a power gamer. He wants big damage and big impact. I didn't want to get bogged down in details like character builds for our players, but for Mac, I'm going to make an exception. There is no doubt in my mind that our Catholic beefcake is going to want to play a paladin from our pre-generated character menu. Let's keep that in mind as we nullify his problem behaviors. We want to play to Mac's strengths so that he gets to show off. Paladins deal additional divine smite damage to undead and fiends, so we'll include those enemies in our adventure. We'll make sure Mac has the opportunity to utilize his abilities to the fullest, so that he fulfills his power fantasy of being badass. Rewards are an important part of the D&D experience. We raid dungeons for cool treasure to fight more powerful enemies so that we can get even better cool treasure. For Mac, that treasure will come in the form of powerful combat items. If he complains about his low AC, we'll make sure the next room holds a magical shield or even an armored duster. I encourage you to make a list of magic items or even a deck of magic item cards if you have the extra time or money, and flip through them during the session to assign the item that feels right at just the right moment. As we are making Mac feel badass, don't mistake me for being a pushover DM. The power gamer only sees their power when there is danger to be overcome. We are going to provide an appropriate challenge so that Mac can rescue his allies and emerge victorious from the brink of death. Or, if Mac's character dies from tough die rolls or overpowered monsters, we want to make sure we give him a glorious death. We come to D, our spotlight hog, our junior thespian. She only wants to play the game so that she has a captive audience for her acting. As Dungeon Master, we are both her audience and her director. How do we find that balance as well as provide an enjoyable experience for all? First, we need to establish that this is a safe space. Dee is used to a hostile environment where she is constantly degraded and her earnest efforts are belittled, backing her into a corner where she can only lash out and degrade herself further. We will not add to that chorus of vicious mockery. We are going to allow Dee to be her cringy self, and by accepting and not mocking her, hopefully she won't choke on her big moments. Next, we need to once again provide rewards. For Mac, We were focused on in-game rewards that encouraged him to pound ass even harder. For D, we are more focused on out-of-game stimuli. When D has an especially good roleplay moment, we are going to reward her with an inspiration die. This is already in the rulebook, you just have to implement it in your game. Be sure to use a physical D20 or other special token so that D can feel you giving her something, telling her she's good. When it's time to use the inspiration, she will give it back, and we can reward it to her as many times as it takes for her to feel just a little bit accomplished as an amateur actress. Third, we need to make sure D's impact is felt on the story itself. If D tries to seduce our bard NPC, we will reciprocate those feelings in-game. If D makes choices to abandon or rescue a quest-giving noble, we will allow that complication to enter into our overarching plot. Now, this doesn't mean we allow D to rewrite the script herself. That would still be a railroad, just one where we are not the conductor. We are going to apply a little pressure on having D use the abilities on her character sheet, with persuasion and performance checks, enchantment and illusion spells, or maybe even some thieving and sneak attacks. Playing up the social roleplay pillar of the game doesn't mean you have to abandon combat and exploration. A good game blends all of these elements and allows players to flourish no matter what their own preference may be. Frank is our game breaker. He rejects the status quo. He wants to get weird with it, and he will try to drag us down to his level. But we are not only going to stay on our perch, we are going to try to lift Frank up to new heights. We are going to employ destructible environments. I'm using a video game term here, but it applies just as easily, if not more easily, to your battle maps or theater of the mind. There are lots of ways for players to feel their influence on the game world, and they don't all involve creative improv exercises. We are going to allow Frank to give in to his base desires to wreck things. We'll hope that once he gets it out of his system on the first village or two, it will lose its luster and he'll focus more on the story. But we could also make the main quest something that involves destruction. Maybe the party needs to escort a payload in the form of a siege engine to lay waste to an enemy stronghold. Or find 5 MacGuffins and use them for some ultimate wish. Or, of course, the thing you're all thinking of. Our destructible environments also extend to the NPCs we field for our players. I've had a little rule for myself ever since my Pathfinder days. Don't put an NPC in front of the players unless you're prepared for them to die. I had to learn this the hard way. No matter what special machinations or abilities you give your villain, your players will find a surprisingly clever or ridiculously dumb way to end them while they're halfway through their monologue. We're going to accept that Frank could do this. And if we don't want him to do this, we can still provide villainous moments with things like the Magic Mouth spell, Simulacra, and of course, Toady Messengers. If we do this right, Frank gets to have his destructive cake, while we get to eat our narrative exposition cake too. We aren't going to change a game breaker's whole ethos in one session, but we can redirect that destructive energy towards a desired target. By painting a clear target for Frank, we can pull aggro onto our villains and monsters, and away from our friendly NPCs and, of course, the other player characters. If we were to put down the law for Frank that there's no player versus player combat, we would just be setting up a rule to be broken. But by rewarding him for breaking our combat encounters rather than trying to punish him for blasting his friends, we make Frank think he is breaking the rules, even though he's playing into our plan all along. And now it's time for Dennis. Everything we've done so far won't matter if we can't convince this control freak to settle down and just try to have a good time. Dennis sees himself as the de facto leader of the group, and by putting on the Dungeon Master hat, I have set myself up as a rival to his rulership. How do I reduce my threat in Dennis's eyes while maintaining some semblance of control over the overall game experience. First, I'm going to start with something superficial but powerful. A gesture Dennis can appreciate. I am dropping my DM screen. The DM screen is a symbol of the divide between the players and the Dungeon Master, and by eliminating it, I help to create a round table that bridges that divide. Besides, I don't need to hide my dice. I'll be rolling out for everyone to see so that they don't accuse me of cheating. And I don't need some cardboard to remind me of combat actions and conditions. I know that shit by heart. Flex on your players and at the same time become one of them by dropping your screen. And let's go deeper. Dennis sees himself as a leader, and we are not going to challenge that leadership. Mac can be the muscle, Dee can be the looks, and Charlie can be the wild card. Dennis can be the brains. We are going to encourage Dennis to bring the group together to accomplish their quests, and anytime we reward the other players, we'll give Dennis a little wink, paying tribute to the fact that their victories are a result of his glorious designs. As for those glorious designs, Dennis won't be satisfied being told the situation and choosing his own adventure by turning to page 4 or page 25. He wants to write the next page. And it turns out there's a system for that too. The 2014 Dungeon Master's Guide has a variant rule for story points that allows for players to cash in a point and take the DM seat. Now, if you're like me, that might be a little too chaotic, but I've found a method that utilizes the concept while keeping the story reined in. When we award inspiration, players can use it as a reroll like normal, or they can cash it in to change something about the scene we are in. Maybe the blacksmith is actually one of the characters' cousins, and he owes them a favor. Maybe someone is bored, so they make the blacksmith attack. Maybe they want more drama, so they make the blacksmith a long-lost bastard with a side quest. These are all possibilities. By giving Dennis story points, we allow him to influence the events while maintaining a grip on the game and the rules. But will this be enough to satisfy our control freak? What if he sees through all of our little tricks and still wants to assert dominance over the group? Now we get to my secret weapon. This is going to pull together all of our nullifying efforts and pacify the worst of our problem players. Now let's look at this prideful chart that I made. I've identified several archetypes, not unlike the subclass archetypes of D&D, but rather this is looking at the wild and complicated ecosystem of the queer community which I am a part of. Up here we have our leather daddies. Right below them we have bulls and rhinos. Of course we have the bear, the wolf, the chicken hawk, the classic beefcake, and then we have our otters. Of course, down here we have the twink. Now, if you are a twink who has a bit more muscle mass, that makes you a twunk. And if you are a twink who is also a skank, that puts you down here at the bottom as a twank. Now, this is important that I show you this, but it's also all surface level. This defines our build, but not our role. What is our role when we are the Dungeon Master? For our role, we need to think about dominance and submission. Top or bottom. Now, most of you may consider that the DM takes on a dominant top role. They are the ones giving the monsters and the environments that the players have to take and enjoy. But there's another layer here. You see, for this entire scenario, I've been playing the role of the service top. I'm giving a lot, but rather than being focused on my own pleasure, I'm only concerned with the players having the best time they can at my table. I'm not interested in being dominant. Rather, I am taking direction from the players so that I can make a more satisfying experience for them. Which brings us back to Dennis. Dennis will not accept any type of top, no matter what service I am giving. That is why for Dennis, I am willing to become a bottom. a power bottom. We are going to take everything he's giving us while generating immense power from the bottom. Dennis will have a good time and feel dominant, but all the while we'll be the one in control. He won't have time to assert dominance over the gang because we're taking everything he's giving. And when our adventure concludes in an explosive climax for everyone, Dennis will feel like he's the one that got everyone there. And that's fine. I don't need glory. I don't need gratitude. I just need everyone to have one good night. And that is what I have accomplished by addressing these problem behaviors. And you can too, if you utilize the Jackson system to make a few good nights of your own. We did it! We met the worst players imaginable and had a great time in spite of it. Now, there are a few things I didn't cover here. I skipped over my usual Session 0 chat because there's no way the gang would sit down for a calm and collected talk about rules and consent. There's the fact that everyone will be drinking. According to them, that's the only reason to play a board game at all. And maybe I'll cover that aspect in a future video. There's the matter of crafting a setting, plotting out your adventure, and creating balance. For all of that, check out my True Sight Tips playlist. And if you are part of the Always Sunny crew, yes, I'm speaking directly to you watching this video. Rob, Glenn, Caitlin, Charlie, Danny, and you too, David Hornsby. Season 17 is probably done filming by this point, but there's a golden opportunity for Season 18. Write the Dungeons & Dragons episode that the fans deserve. And if you need a D&D consultant, I might just know a guy. But before you hire me, hire Mary Mahoney. Mary made a fantastic deep delve into what makes this series great and why it hits some dissatisfying lows. If you like Always Sunny, please make sure to check out that video next. That's all for today. Thank you for going on this journey with me. If you stuck around to this point, then I hope you had a fun time, and I also hope that you learned something. If there's another problem player you're having trouble with, hit me up in the comments and we can talk about it. If there's enough discussion, I might just make an electric boogaloo. Until then, you have a nat 20 day. Bye-bye.